at the end of the day, I think a lot of Bitcoiners are really too close to the picture and they need to zoom out and realize that owning as much Bitcoin as possible is not the end goal. Bitcoin is actually the means to an end. And the end that we're trying to accomplish is really the life outcomes that we want to achieve for ourselves and our families. And so if someone is, 40 years old with, married, 3 young kids, they want to make sure they can go to Christian school and they, want to take a family vacation twice a year and maybe buy a house in the mountains or whatever to make those memories and retire early. And, they have these financial goals that substantially impact the fulfillment of their life. That's what we're trying to achieve. It's not just own as much Bitcoin as possible.
Welcome to the Business Bitcoinization Show, the show dedicated to helping you enrich your life and grow your business with Bitcoin, the hardest money on planet Earth. I'm your host, Josh Friedeman, and our guest today is Mitch Moore of Strong Wealth. We're going to be talking about how buying and holding Bitcoin is not a sufficient financial plan, as well as some of the things that Mitch thinks Bitcoin will first disrupt when it comes to the financial industry. We're going to get to our interview with Mitch right after this. Business owners, unlock the benefits Bitcoin has to offer your business with the Bitcoin for Business Quick Start Guide. This 27-page guide highlights the 6 ways you can grow your business with Bitcoin. Check it out in the show notes. Mitch, welcome to the show.
Excited to be here, Josh. I think we're going to have a great conversation.
Absolutely. So I'd like to start off every single interview with a few questions that help us to get to know you a little bit better and give us some insight for our own lives. You ready for these?
Yep.
Question number 1 is this: when and how did you first learn about Bitcoin?
Yeah, so it came up at a few different times in my life. Initially was actually 2017. I was in college at the time, and a kid just down from my dorm room was talking about it. He was talking about how the price was pumping, going crazy, and he was thinking about buying some, with some money he got from his parents or something like that. And at the time I was working my way through school. I was studying finance. So you think I may have, been into it a little bit more than I was, but with my own money personally, I didn't have any to invest. So I kind of dismissed it. And, we all probably wish we would have bought Bitcoin earlier than we actually did. But, there's actually an interesting story that I love to tell when talking about this is previous to starting Strong Wealth, my business now, I was working for Charles Schwab and I was taking a lot of investor support calls. This was from start of 2020 until I started Strong Wealth in 2021. And it was during the market crash of March 2020, the fastest market crash in history. We were hitting circuit breakers like crazy. There was 3,000 calls on hold. People were waiting hours just to talk to us because they didn't know what was going on. And there were a lot of trades that people believed they weren't getting filled correctly for. And so they're calling in about that, whatever. And so it had been a super long day of work. I was taking 10 hours of calls at that point in my career. And it was late at night. Things were starting to slow back down. And I got a guy call in and he was asking me just a couple routine questions. I can't even remember exactly what they were. But then he started to talk to me about his personal investment strategy and how buying gold and burying it in his yard and holding some in his house was actually a big part of, his wealth accumulation or maybe protection strategy, we'll say. Mm-hmm. And, I had gotten a couple of those guys, in my time working there. And so I started just to really brush him off with what he was saying. Sometimes you can kind of tune people out, let them ramble for a while. They love talking to the Schwab people. And then he stops and he says, "Mitch, you seem like a smart guy." Who knows why? But he said, "You seem like a smart guy. Did you know that the Federal Reserve is actually not a part of the government at all? It's actually a private institution." And at that moment, I realized, I guess, that my education had failed me. I studied finance. I thought I knew more than the guy calling in for sure. But he said that to me and I didn't know that. And that has never been said to me before. So I was like, no, I didn't know that. And he goes on to tell me a little bit more about it. And he said, Well, there's a book I'd like you to read, and he recommends The Creature of Jekyll Island. You've probably heard of it. Mm-hmm. And that conversation sat with me. I didn't necessarily take action on it in any way because he didn't explain to me the downstream effects of that. That's just all he said and kind of left it at that. And so that was really the first seed planted, I think, of the hidden truths of our financial system that would open people up to Bitcoin. And then from there, Bitcoin goes on a bull run. I'm going to start this business as a financial planner. And I know that I need to understand what Bitcoin is to be able to guide our clients well. And so I start, listening to Saylor, Breedlove, Safedine on all the podcasts I can find. And it starts to slowly but surely click. And I wouldn't say it fully set in as to what the problem was and the problem that Bitcoin solves until I read the fiat standard and followed through on that guy's advice, reading The Creature of Jekyll Island. At that point, the light bulb went on, and I was orange pilled from then on.
And it's really cool. I mean, first of all, I'm a Schwab customer, and the customer service has always been excellent. The people that you're talking to on the other line, they're always great. So appreciate you for being one of those guys. But it's really cool to think that someone who's talking to you on the other end, talking to customer support on the other end, the customers themselves can actually have a positive influence when it comes to helping people understand what money is and what money isn't. So as a very interesting anecdote, hopefully it'll be encouraging to other people as they're talking to customer support specialists online in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the common greeting of that day and that time working there was, what the is going on with my account? You can fill in the blank.
Yeah. So question number 2 is, what's an insight or fact about Bitcoin that you wish everyone understood?
I wouldn't say it's about Bitcoin specifically. It's actually about our current financial system and just the theft, corruption, and just misaligned incentives that, allow our financial system allows to happen. Like I said, for my own personal story, it really wasn't until I read the fiat standard and The Creature of Jekyll Island that things really clicked for me, because I didn't understand the root problem and the downstream effects of it. So that's really what I wish more people understood, because then Bitcoin would come so easy to them if they really saw that clearly.
Question number 3, what's the Bitcoin resource you most recommend to other people?
Yeah, to non-Bitcoiners, I would say it is the fiat standard because of the reasons I've mentioned. But to Bitcoiners, which is a lot of conversations I'm having over the last 6 months or so, I find myself recommending Thank God for Bitcoin. Kind of showing them the parallels between Bitcoin and the economic kind of passages or verses laid out in the Bible. It's interesting for sure.
Question number 4, beyond Bitcoin, what's a resource, tool, or idea that's been helpful to you or your work recently?
I thought about this for a long time, knowing that this question was coming. And, I don't want this to seem like a cop-out answer, but really the best idea or resource for me in my entire life has been my faith, my faith in Jesus. And so, honestly, over the last 3 to 4 months, business has been slow. I've had some personal life challenges come my way, and it's been a tougher time, I would say. But really being able to lean on that foundation gives me peace, just knowing that it's all going to be taken care of in the future. As I just have to endure, and learn the lessons that I need to learn along the way. So that's, I would say, my biggest resource at this point in time in my life.
So question number 5, we call it our arbitrary but insightful question, and it's this: as a general life principle, is it better to ask why or why not?
Yeah, this one didn't take me long at all. Why not? Was an easy answer for me. And I'll tell you why. Because when I started this business, there was a lot of fear around taking that leap, quitting my job, starting my own business. There's a lot of stress, anxiety, and unknown that come with that. But whenever I'm considering taking risks or making big decisions, one frame that I like to look at things through is, what is the worst case scenario? And oftentimes I find that the worst case scenario really isn't as bad as we think until we just acknowledge what it could be. And in that specific scenario for me, I was like, well, if I fail in business, I can just get another job or even go back to Schwab. They're hiring people all the time, and they would, love to have somebody like me. So my real worst case scenario in starting my business was going back to my current life scenario and circumstances in that case. So for me, it's why not? Because the fear of the unknown is usually a lot bigger in our minds than it actually will be in real life.
If you were hit by a bus right now, could your family access your Bitcoin? When's the right time to stop hodling and use Bitcoin to impact your family's lives, not just yours? What if Bitcoin doesn't reach the value you expect, or it takes longer to reach that value? Do you have a plan? Do you have the proper trust structure to avoid probate, maintain your privacy, and minimize taxes? Do you want to avoid taxes to stack more sats or leverage your stack without selling? Should you add Bitcoin to your business's balance sheet? Are you truly confident in your self-custody setup? If any of those questions made you stop and think, you probably realize that simply buying and holding Bitcoin is not a complete financial plan. That's where Strong Wealth comes in. Orange-pilled advisors blending traditional financial planning with deep Bitcoin expertise, giving you the best of both worlds, so you can sleep peacefully knowing you're making the right moves for your family no matter what happens. Schedule a free call at strongwealth.net. That's strongwealth.net. Strong Wealth. Wealth management for Bitcoiners by Bitcoiners. Today's episode of Business Bitcoinization is proudly brought to you by Velis Commerce, where the future of business technology meets Bitcoin. As we journey through the era of Bitcoin and its transformational impact on businesses, there's one name that stands out: Velis Commerce. Whether you're looking to build a cutting-edge website, a seamless mobile app, or custom software, Velis is your go-to team. They've been diving deep into the world of Bitcoin since 2014, making them one of the most experienced groups for integrating Bitcoin and Lightning payments into a variety of digital platforms. But here's what truly sets them apart. Velis Commerce doesn't just build. They bring a wealth of knowledge to ensure your project's success from day one. Their team understands the nuances of Bitcoin, ensuring that your business stays ahead of the curve. And for all business Bitcoinization listeners out there, Velis Commerce is offering a free consultation to kickstart your project the right way. So if you're ready to future-proof your business in the coming age of hyper-Bitcoinization, head over to veliscommerce.com or reach out on Twitter at veliscommerce. Let's make sure your business thrives in the Bitcoin era. Well, Mitch, we're here today to talk about your business, Strong Wealth. You've already talked about it a little bit in those earlier questions. If you could share with us about what you guys are doing at Strong Wealth and maybe who in particular you guys are for.
We are really the wealth managers for Bitcoiners. And, we have worked with people who are brand new to Bitcoin all the way to hardcore Bitcoiners who, own 300 plus Bitcoin, and, that's 100% of their liquid net worth. So, it's a transition that honestly we did just make in the last, 3 to 6 months of fully focusing on working with Bitcoiners. Previously we had worked with business owners and, we're really added a lot of value there, but we realized that we have this unique advantage with this Bitcoin knowledge and believe that that's where the world is going in general. This is the direction that the financial industry is going if Bitcoin plays out like we think it can. And so, so now, we're really blending the worlds of traditional financial planning and all the, amazing things that come with that with, deep Bitcoin expertise to really give Bitcoiners who have, I believe, been dismissed in this area, up to this point. There's a few others out there that do things similar to what we do. But in large part, what we hear from prospects is, well, I talked to, maybe my current financial advisor and they told me to sell it all and it's 60% of my net worth. I'm like, why would I ever do that? Or, they tell me I'm wrong, or they're just going to dismiss it in their analysis, or, whatever it is. And so Bitcoiners really run into this brick wall of, I see Bitcoin, I believe in it. And, but for some reason, I can't find somebody to help me incorporate this into other financial planning areas of my life.
So I want to ask more about that in just a second, and maybe kind of how Bitcoin starts to change or affect financial planning. But first of all, I think especially since you are a relatively new business owner, just over the last year or so, a lot of business owners might get a lot of value from hearing about kind of your process of figuring out who your target market was and developing, marketing content on your website? Because one thing is, when I went to strongwealth.net, like one of the first things that I recognized, and I think I've shared this with you already, is like your intro video is super on point. And I'd just be interested to hear, like, what are your thoughts on kind of developing who you're reaching out to and kind of what that marketing strategy looks like as a new business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I started Strong Wealth back in 2021. So we're almost, actually, it would be 3 years today. That's pretty crazy.
Wow. Congrats.
I appreciate it. But yeah, so finding my target market, it's really been kind of like a stumbling block, I would say. But the main question that I asked myself in the beginning, and then even asked myself when we were considering making this full switch to only working with Bitcoiners and turning away everyone else, was, who are we uniquely positioned to serve? Like, that is the primary question. And previous to, this season of life, or this season of business, I should say, my answer to that was young business owners. I'm a young business owner. I know the financial planning stuff, but I'm also going through the business related stuff in real time with them. So I can relate to everything that they're going through, everything that they need, what I can help with. And I believe that I'm uniquely positioned to serve those people. And being able to connect with them, on a, outside of finance level really helped in getting those clients. And I was able to build up a good foundation for our business that way. And then brought on my business partner about a year ago, and he was a full hardcore Bitcoiner at that time. And so he's brought me even further down the rabbit hole, if you will. But yeah, when we decided to make this transition to our target market is, a Bitcoiner who's married. It could be a business owner, could not. He's got a few kids, and he wants to maybe retire early, or be generous, or he was an early Bitcoiner, has a high net worth now, and wants to pass that on to provide generational wealth. When we're thinking through that, we are uniquely positioned to serve that person because of the knowledge and experience that we have in this, and honestly, not many others are doing it. So that's the primary question that I would ask myself if I was a newer business owner, is that, and then, it may change over time, and that's okay.
So someone listening right now might be wondering, am I the right fit? Like, I guess, how would you define Bitcoiner? Like, who's a Bitcoiner, who's not? Is it just anyone who's open to having Bitcoin as part of their financial plan? Or are you looking for someone who has a little bit more specific intent with whatever Bitcoin holdings they currently have or want to have in the future?
That's a great question, and one that we had to think through in defining our ideal client. And so we defined it as essentially someone with enough Bitcoin that if Bitcoin were to become obsolete for whatever reason, go to zero, their financial future would be completely derailed. So they have enough skin in the game, essentially, to where it's in a meaningful portion of their overall assets. And because of that, we really have to uniquely plan around that large Bitcoin allocation. So it's not somebody who is just open to Bitcoin. If someone comes in and they're open to it, okay, we'll talk and see where they are. But really, we want someone who gets Bitcoin already, so we can go straight down into the weeds and help them with everything that surrounds, that large Bitcoin investment and what that has the potential to become over the next, 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future.
So then maybe we can get to some more of the how Bitcoin and financial planning go together. If that's the case, and that clarifying point helps a lot, where it's like they actually have enough to where if Bitcoin, goes to zero, which I don't think either of us think will happen, but if something were to seriously happen and it just tanks, then their lives would be materially affected. In that case, what types of stuff do you help that type of Bitcoiner with, so that if Bitcoin were to significantly fall, they wouldn't be in that tight spot?
Yeah, absolutely. If Bitcoin were to significantly collapse, we'll say, we work with people who have 20% of their investment assets in Bitcoin all the way to 100% of their investment assets in Bitcoin. And we're okay with anywhere that you stand on that continuum. We're not going to convince you that it should be something else. And so really what we're doing, if somebody has 80, 90, 100% of their net worth in Bitcoin, we want to make sure that they first understand the decision that they're making. Here are the potential trade-offs, the things that could happen, the various scenarios that could play out. If they do play out, are you okay with that being your reality? We have to make sure that they fully understand that and understand the decision that they're making. Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of Bitcoiners are really too close to the picture, and they need to zoom out and realize that owning as much Bitcoin as possible is not the end goal. Bitcoin is actually the means to an end. It's not the end in and of itself. And the end that we're trying to accomplish is really the life outcomes that we want to achieve for ourselves and our families. And so if someone is, 40 years old with, married again, 3 kids, 3 young kids, they want to put them through, they want to make sure they can go to Christian school, and they, want to take a family vacation twice a year and maybe buy a house in the mountains or whatever, to make those memories and retire early. And, they have these financial goals that substantially impact the fulfillment of their life. That's what we're trying to achieve. It's not just own as much Bitcoin as possible. And so maybe that is 100% allocation for some people. Maybe it's not for others. And we think that that's okay. So really just making them aware of the potential reality that could happen in the future is where we're going to start. And if Bitcoin does happen to go to zero, whatever, again, I don't think it's going to, and you don't either, and probably no one listening does. But we just have to acknowledge that anything is possible. A lot of things that have happened over the last 4 years that even kind of opened our eyes to, Bitcoin in and of itself and why it's necessary. We wouldn't have thought, what would have happened. So that foundational understanding is what we're going to start with anybody who owns a large amount, and make sure that they are prepared for any possible future, just mentally, in that way.
One of the things that you also talk about is making sure that your family is prepared in the case of something happening to you. So what would be some of those things, maybe just high level things that people should be thinking about when it comes to making sure that if they were to die today, their family would know how to access the Bitcoin and continue leading a fulfilled life, at least financially speaking, even when you're gone?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the estate planning around Bitcoin is one of the biggest value adds of our service that a lot of people, I think, are overlooking at this point in time. It's a big part of traditional financial planning, but Bitcoiners, I don't think, fully appreciate it yet because they like to throw everything out of the window and say, "Oh, I'll just buy and hold, and that's all I need to do." So yeah, there's really 2 things that you need to be thinking about when you want to pass Bitcoin on, to whether or not it's your kids, grandkids, or maybe just something happens to you and it goes to your wife. You need to think about passing the legal possession of that Bitcoin. By law, it is theirs. And then you also have to be thinking about giving them physical possession of that Bitcoin. Obviously we can't, physically hold our Bitcoin in our hands, but making sure that they can access it. So, when it comes to estate planning, I think something that a lot of Bitcoiners don't understand is if you don't have a trust in place of any kind, your Bitcoin will actually go through probate. And what that means is it's going to go to the court, and the court is going to say they're going to make the decision on where the Bitcoin goes to, and they're going to announce that to the world, how much Bitcoin you own and who now has it. And anyone who is a true Bitcoiner, I don't think they want that to happen. Privacy is usually a big focus of Bitcoiners, and something that, we take very seriously with our service. And so making sure that we have the right estate planning structure in place to legally, pass that Bitcoin on, and even avoid estate taxes in some ways, is very important. And then when we look at just making sure that they can access it, okay, first we need to understand the best custody setup, that will be secure for you now, but also accessible for the people who need to get it if something happens to you. And so, There are different levels, I would say, of custody setups. If somebody has a large amount of Bitcoin and they're already kind of earmarking it for generational wealth, well, then we'll probably look at, setting up an irrevocable trust structure, getting it out of their estate to avoid estate taxes. But then the custody setup with that will probably need to be bringing in a third party institution. A lot of Bitcoiners don't like that. But then, we can make sure that it's easily accessible for the grandkids, when it is time, 20, 30 years from now. And that can be facilitated easily for them. It's really different for everybody, but it's just critical to make sure that you have the right legal structure in place to make sure the assets pass exactly how you want them to in private and avoid tax. And then we also need to make sure we have the right custody setup in place that is both going to be secure for you now, maintain your privacy if that is, very important, even avoid trusting third parties if we want to, but then informing the next generation or our spouse on what Bitcoin is, how, leaving them the instructions to be able to access it, and giving them instructions on how to manage it well. Because if they don't understand what it is, you've spent your whole life, accumulating, working hard to stack sats, and they don't get it. Well, it's probably going to get sold right away, and they're going to go spend the money or maybe even invest in something else just because they don't understand it. So, at a high level, that's what I would say, what they need to think about when passing this Bitcoin on to family.
So we've been talking about Bitcoiners, and I think you've sort of said people that have anywhere from 20 to 100% of their net worth, savings, investments in Bitcoin. But let's turn briefly to just a more normal, global population. How do you see Bitcoin changing personal finance and financial planning in the future? As I'm listening to podcasts, it seems like still Bitcoin sort of looked down on, or there's just not a lot of conversations happening about it. But how do you see things changing as adoption increases?
Ooh, yeah, we could go many different directions with this one. I'll speak to something that I hear very often is that, Bitcoin will make financial advisors obsolete. We won't need to be professional investors, on a Bitcoin standard. And I would agree that it will make a large chunk of the financial industry obsolete. But financial planners specifically, I don't think we will ever be completely eliminated by Bitcoin, because when you boil financial planning down to what it really is, it's connecting our money to the outcomes that we want to achieve in our life. Traditional financial advisors that are just, taking client money, investing in a few index funds and charging 1%, and that's all they do. Yeah, they won't survive into the future, because, when everyone is not forced to be an investor, they can just truly save and build their wealth that way and store it into the future, then yeah, they won't need somebody like that. But someone who is comprehensively looking at, taxes, estate planning, insurance, cash flow, planning for goals, all of these different things, and helping a family think through all of these different scenarios and moving pieces, I don't think we're ever going to be completely eliminated. If we are, then it'll be a very long time. So all that to say, if we go to a Bitcoin standard eventually, it will eliminate a large part of the financial industry. But I think myself and the position that we're taking will be a one that will stick around through that. Definitely.
So on a Bitcoin standard that you just mentioned, what do you think are the first things to go in the financial industry?
Well, I think, like I said, I think the people who are just focusing on investments and managing assets will be one of the first, industries to go, just because of, what I mentioned earlier. right now, because of our financial system, I mean, everyone is forced to be a professional investor on top of their job that they're already expected to be a professional at. And so that's what makes, us, the financial advice industry, so big and bloated, I would say, is because of that. And then we also have, derivatives and, debt structure of our financial system. It gets so complex, it's insane. And so there's a large part of that even industry that will get cut off, I guess. But yeah, I would say the people who are only focused on, investments, that they will be one of the first to go if we did happen to go to a Bitcoin standard tomorrow.
So you've mentioned the creature from Jekyll Island a few times already and talked about the creation of the Federal Reserve and how there are downstream effects from that. Could you talk a little bit about some of those effects that you've seen? I'm guessing a lot of people who are still listening to this are Bitcoiners and might already have some sort of idea about this, but I think it'd still be interesting to hear some of your thoughts, kind of expanding on that conversation we were having a bit earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that is very important to me is my health. And so, fiat food, I don't know, I haven't read that book specifically by Saifedean, but in the fiat standard, he goes into the food industry specifically. We could talk about education, we could go into the others, but food specifically is a big one. With the inflationary, system that we have, companies are always focused on profits and profit margins. And so they are looking to cut costs at any turn. And so even though technology is advancing over time and allowing things to be produced at a cheaper and cheaper cost, our cost at the grocery store is going up, and they are actually lowering the quality of the ingredients or the food, that we're consistently buying at the grocery store, because they are trying to keep their costs as low as possible and their profit margins, as high as possible, because that's what gets rewarded, on Wall Street, is making sure that profit is always increasing, earnings per share is always going up. And so the misaligned incentive there is forcing our food quality to just go into the dirt, I guess. And it's really poisoning, our bodies physically. And it, again, our financial system already affects the poor more than anyone else, oppresses maybe would be the right word to use. And so because of, their costs of everything are going up, they're getting financially squeezed, and then they're forced to buy this cheap garbage food that is then poisoning their bodies physically. It's just kind of this insidious cancer, I guess, that really starts to cause a lot of problems in many different industries. But that's specifically what I would say about food, because that's important. One important area to me.
So another thing you've talked about a few different times is your faith. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how that's been foundational for you and some of the other things that you prioritize for a good life that is not just focused on finance, not just focused on more money, but kind of that end goal you were talking about, where it's like, a full, robust, quality life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, my faith is the foundation of really everything that I do and everything that we even do within Strong Wealth. I mean, Jacob and I are the only two in the business at this point, and that's very important to us. And so we're always thinking of ways that we can demonstrate our love for Jesus and how we serve the people that become clients of ours. And so one idea that I like to reiterate a lot to him within the business and just remind myself of is, we are ultimately working for the Lord. And so let's approach everything with excellence. Let's show everyone that we are truly giving our best, because we're doing it not for them, we're doing it for, our Creator. And so that permeates really every area of my life. So faith is a big one outside of money. Also, I mentioned my physical health. I exercise regularly, eat healthy, doing all those things. Every area of my life, I want it to be fruitful and not just focused on, accumulating much money as possible or, making money my God, essentially. I think a lot of Bitcoiners tend to do that. They will make Bitcoin their top priority or their most important thing in their life that they're focused on constantly. And at that point, Bitcoin has become your God. And so, maintaining that balance of priorities is important. And I would say, my faith and my health and my relationships are really the three things that I'm focused on, outside of business, outside of money, to make sure I'm living a full and fulfilled life that honors God. Yeah. And I would say, that faith aspect permeates the business in a way that we encourage generosity and tithing, to our clients. Most of our clients are Christians, but it's not a requirement by any means. And so we definitely encourage generosity because of those beliefs as well, because of belief that, it will work on our hearts, and God loves a cheerful giver, and we'll bless that. So that's one way that's incorporated into our business that I don't think a lot of other people do.
I appreciate you sharing all that, Mitch. What are some final thoughts you might have for the audience? We've already talked about a good bit today, but final thoughts you might want to share, as well as where people can go to find out more about you and Strong Wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the final thing I'll say is that buying and holding Bitcoin is not a financial plan. I know I've said that to you multiple times, and I tweet about that a lot, on social media, but it's important for Bitcoiners to zoom out and understand that there are a lot of other areas of their financial lives that can be optimized that actually could help them, grow, preserve, secure their Bitcoin stack if that's ultimately what they want to do, or translate the Bitcoin wealth that they've been able to build into real life change for, their families, their spouses, their grandkids. You have the opportunity to really make a tremendous impact because you are this early to Bitcoin. And so getting everything in place, planning around Bitcoin is something they should take very seriously. I mean, we have the opportunity to live through the early days of the greatest asset ever discovered. So let's take it seriously. Let's look at all the areas surrounding that and plan intentionally, in our finances. That's the final thought I'll leave everyone with. But if they want to check out what we do, they can go to strongwealth.net. Learn all about the services that we offer and what we do for people, or I'm on Twitter, and I still call it Twitter. I'll never stop calling it Twitter, I don't think. But I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Mitch D. Moore.
Great. Well, Mitch, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Well, friends, it's a wrap. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Business Bitcoinization Show. If you want to reach out to either me or Mitch, you can find those links down in the show notes. And be sure to check out strongwealth.net. As always, keep building, keep growing, and until next time, keep living and leading well. Thanks to those who have been supporting the show on Fountain in the last week, including Eifster48, No Waste BTC Signs, Bowtied Groundhog, Joseph the Rolf, and Black Lotus 99. Black Lotus sent a note with his boost about last week's episode with Charlie Stevens and said, "Great episode, #plebchain." If you would like to support the show, you can listen on Fountain and stream sats as you listen, or send a boost. And if you include a note with that boost, I'll be sure to read it on the show.